I noticed it one night when my phone lit up and it wasn't her. Just a weather alert. And the silence that followed felt heavier than it should have. We used to talk every night. Not in a big, romantic way. Not long calls that sounded like a movie. It was smaller than that. It was habit. It was routine. It was the quiet certainty that at the end of a day, no matter what kind of day it was, there would be her name on my screen. I didn't realize how much comfort there was in something that simple until it stopped happening. Her name was Claire. I'm not the kind of person who's good at beginnings. I don't remember dates. I don't remember what people wore, or what song was playing, or any of the details that make stories sound polished. I remember how it felt. We met at a friend's birthday dinner. One of those crowded tables where people keep shifting seats, and everyone talks over each other, and the food arrives in waves. I sat across from her, and for most of the night, I barely noticed her. Not because she wasn't attractive. She was. But because everything was loud and busy, and I didn't think anything important was about to happen. At some point, I made a stupid joke about the restaurant being so dim it felt like we were eating inside a candle. She laughed in a way that made me look up. Like she wasn't just being polite. After that, we started talking in short bursts. Between other conversations. Between people leaning in to refill water. Between someone asking for another round. She wasn't trying to impress me. She didn't talk too much. She didn't dominate the space. She just stayed present. When I said something, she actually listened like it mattered. That was what I noticed first. Later, when everyone stood up to leave, she was putting on her coat, and she asked if I wanted to walk with them to the parking lot. It wasn't flirtatious. It was practical. It was cold outside. We walked out in a group, and she stayed beside me without making it a thing. That night, she didn't give me her number. We didn't have a moment where we looked at each other and understood something. We just said goodbye, and that was it. 2 days later, she followed me on Instagram. I followed her back. A day after that, she replied to a story I posted. Something simple. A question. Like she was continuing a conversation we hadn't finished. I answered. She answered back. And then it turned into another message, and another. At first, it was casual. It was light. We talked about work, and about the city, and about small annoyances that were easy to laugh at. Nothing personal. Nothing that felt risky. But the messages came at night, usually after dinner, usually when things got quiet. It happened naturally. There wasn't a discussion about it. I'd be sitting on my couch with the TV on, half watching something, and I'd see her name. Or she would see mine. We would talk for 10 minutes, sometimes 20, sometimes longer. And then one of us would say, "All right, I should sleep." And we'd send a last message, and that would be the end. Until the next night. The consistency was the thing, not the content. Even when there wasn't much to say, we still found a reason to check in. How was your day? Did you eat? What are you doing? Are you still up? It wasn't dramatic. It was steady. We didn't live in the same city. Not far, but far enough that weekday plans weren't easy. About 2 hours apart, depending on traffic. Close enough that it wasn't long distance in the dramatic sense, but far enough that the distance shaped us. We visited on weekends when we could. Sometimes she came to me. Sometimes I went to her. Those weekends were ordinary. We'd grocery shop. We'd take walks. We'd cook something simple and sit on her couch and watch a show we didn't care that much about. But the real relationship still happened at night. When we weren't together, the nights kept us connected. If we had a good weekend, we'd talk about it afterward, replaying the small moments like they were proof of something. If we had a quiet weekend, we'd talk about that too. It didn't matter. The point was that we were still there. I used to fall asleep with my phone in my hand sometimes. Not because I was waiting for anything urgent, just because I liked knowing she was on the other end, typing, reading, responding. She sent voice notes sometimes when she was too tired to type. I still remember how her voice sounded when she whispered into her phone late at night, like she didn't want to wake the room around her. Like she was sharing something private even when she was only talking about how annoying her coworker had been. I didn't think of it as intimacy then. It was just what we did. I don't know when I started needing it. It didn't feel like need at the time. It felt like comfort, like a soft place to land after a day. She became the first person I wanted to tell things to. Not big things. The small stuff. The kind of stuff you forget if you don't share it. Something funny I saw on the street. A weird moment in a meeting. A song that came on the radio that made me think of her for no reason at all. And she did the same with me. I could tell, not because she said, "You're my person," but because she would message me first. She would tell me things before she posted them anywhere else. She would send me a picture of her coffee in the morning. or a screenshot of a text from her mom, or a photo of the sky out her window because it looked like a painting. It added up. For a while, I felt chosen in a way I didn't even know I needed. And then, slowly, it started to change. Not with a fight, not with a betrayal, not with a moment you could point to. It changed the way most real things change, in tiny, almost invisible shifts that you dismiss because they don't feel important enough to name. Her replies started coming a little later. At first it was nothing. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. She had a life. She had work. She had friends. I wasn't keeping score. But the pattern formed anyway. The replies weren't just slower. They were shorter. Where she used to ask questions, she started answering mine and then stopping. Where she used to send long messages, she started sending a sentence. Yeah, that sounds annoying. Wow. LOL. I hated how much I noticed it. I hated how much it affected me. Because it seemed small. It seemed petty. People have off days. People get busy. So I told myself it was normal. We still talked every night. Mostly. Some nights, she said she was tired and going to bed early. That was normal. Some nights, she said she had plans and would text later. That was normal too. But later started turning into tomorrow. And tomorrow started turning into nothing. I'd wake up to a message from her saying, "Sorry, I fell asleep." And it would be fine. It would be normal. Except it started happening more often. Enough that the apologies started feeling automatic, like a script. I didn't complain. I didn't make it into a conversation. I didn't want to be the person who demands attention. So I adjusted my expectations without telling her I was doing it. I started waiting longer before I texted. I started not sending the second message if she didn't reply to the first. I started telling myself not to reach out first, just to see what would happen. That was the beginning of a quiet kind of anxiety I didn't want to admit I had. Because once you start testing someone, even softly, it means you're no longer sure where you stand. We used to FaceTime sometimes. It wasn't every night, but it used to happen at least once or twice a week. A casual wanna call that would turn into an hour without us realizing it. That started fading too. If I suggested a call, she'd say, "Maybe tomorrow." Or, "I'm kind of drained tonight." Or, "Let's do it this weekend." Tomorrow would come and go. The weekend would come and we'd see each other. So the call wouldn't happen, and then we'd go back to our cities and nothing would happen again. At some point, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd heard her voice at night. Our visits still happened, but less often. Not because we decided to. It just got harder to coordinate. She had work stuff. I had work stuff. There was always something. A friend's birthday. A family thing. A weekend that slipped away. When we did see each other, it was comfortable. Familiar. But something was different. There were more gaps in conversation. More moments where she looked at her phone. More moments where I felt like I was watching her exist rather than being with her. The silence used to feel easy. Now it felt like something neither of us knew how to cross. I started noticing how rarely she looked me in the eyes when she talked. Not in an obvious way, not like she was hiding something. More like her attention was split. Like her mind was already somewhere else even when her body was in the room with me. If I told a story, she'd smile at the right places, but she didn't ask follow-up questions. The conversation would end where it began, like she was letting it pass through her. I tried to ignore it. I tried to be normal. I tried to be the version of myself who didn't need constant proof. But the truth is, I didn't need constant proof before. I only started needing it when it started disappearing. We still said good night sometimes, but not every night. When it did happen, it felt thinner, like punctuation. Good night, red heart. Night. I started noticing that I was the one sending the heart more often. That's a humiliating thing to admit, the way you can measure emotional distance with tiny symbols. But it's true. When you're in it, you notice everything you never used to notice. I started saving things to tell her, the way I always had. Something that happened at work. A joke I heard. A random thought. But then the moment would come, and she wouldn't be there. Or she'd reply hours later, and the thing I wanted to say would already feel stale. So I stopped saving things. And that was a bigger shift than I realized at the time. Because when you stop saving parts of your day for someone, it means they're no longer woven into your life the way they used to be. One night, I had a bad day. Not dramatic. Nothing catastrophic. Just one of those days where everything feels heavier than it should. A meeting that went badly. An argument in traffic. A small disappointment that stacked on top of another. I came home tired, sat on my couch, and the first instinct I had was to text her. Not for advice. Not to fix anything. just to hear her. I typed you up. Then I stared at it. And instead of hitting send, I hesitated. Not because I thought she would be asleep, because I didn't know if she would want to talk. That thought was so quiet I almost missed it. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't make my chest tighten. It was more like a soft realization sliding into place. I deleted the message. I set my phone down on the couch beside me, and I sat there with my hands empty, feeling the absence of something that used to be automatic. We used to talk every night, and now I was afraid to bother her. That was the turning point. Not a fight, not a breakup, not a conversation that changed everything. Just me, sitting in my apartment, realizing I had started editing my need for her. And once you realize you're doing that, you can't pretend you aren't. After that night, I became aware of the pattern in a way I hadn't been before. The silence wasn't just happening to us. We were participating in it. We were letting it grow. I didn't confront her. I didn't send a long message. I didn't demand an explanation. I didn't even know what I would be asking for. Because I couldn't ask for the past back. I couldn't ask her to want me the way she used to. So I did what I had already been doing, only more consciously. I pulled back. Not to punish her. Not as a strategy. It felt like self-protection. Like stepping away from a cold surface you keep touching, hoping it will suddenly be warm. I stopped initiating most nights. I stopped checking my phone with that same small hope. I stopped waiting. And the strange part was, the world didn't end. Nothing blew up. No dramatic conversation happened. The relationship didn't officially end in a way I could explain to someone else. It just thinned out. There were a few moments after that where she would reach out. A meme. A short hey. A reaction to something I posted. And every time, there was a small part of me that wanted to treat it like a reset. Like proof that I was wrong. Like maybe she was still there. But those moments never turned into the old nights. They never turned into long, wandering conversations. They were quick touches, like checking if something still existed. And I would respond, because of course I would. But I could feel the difference. I could feel that it wasn't the same. I started noticing something else too. How many things she used to tell me first that she now told me last. She would mention plans after they happened. She would mention a stressful day after it was already resolved. She would mention a decision she made like it wasn't something that affected me. Not intentionally. Not with malice. Just casually. Like she hadn't thought of me in the process. That was what hurt. Not the existence of her life outside of me. She always had that, and I respected it. It was the feeling that I was no longer part of her internal map. No longer one of the people she naturally turned toward. Sometimes people think distance happens because someone does something. They imagine cheating or lying or some clear betrayal. But this kind of distance doesn't need an event. It just needs time. Time, and small moments of choosing something else without thinking. Time, and two people getting used to the absence until it feels normal. There were nights where I would almost reach out anyway. Almost ask, are we okay? Almost say, I miss us. But every version of that conversation felt like I'd be asking for reassurance instead of connection. Like I'd be asking her to say the right words, not to feel the right feelings. And I didn't want words. I wanted the instinct. The reaching. The nightly gravity that used to pull us toward each other. I didn't know how to ask for that. So I didn't. Weeks passed in a way that felt both slow and fast. Slow because I was aware of every empty night. Fast because time moves whether you're ready or not. At some point, we went from, we haven't talked tonight, to we haven't talked this week, without a clear line between them. I remember one Sunday afternoon, I opened our messages for the first time in a while and scrolled. Not looking for nostalgia. Not trying to hurt myself. Just trying to understand. The last real conversation, the kind where we actually talked, where we asked questions, where we stayed present, was months ago. I stared at the date. It felt impossible, because in my head, we were still something. We were still connected. But the evidence sat there on the screen, plain and unromantic. We weren't. Not in the way that mattered. We never had a breakup conversation. That's the part that feels strange to say out loud, because people expect endings to come with a statement. But some relationships don't end like that. They just expire. They fade until neither person is sure who should say the final thing. We still followed each other. We still watched each other's stories. Sometimes she liked to post. Sometimes I did too. From the outside, we might have looked like people who were still in each other's lives. But the closeness was gone. And without closeness, everything else is just a shadow. I tried once to bring it up gently. Not a confrontation. Not an accusation. We were texting about something small, and I said, We haven't really talked in a while. She replied, yeah, I've been busy. That was it. No question back. No curiosity. No, I missed that too. Just a statement. Busy. I stared at it for a long time. Because I didn't know what to do with it. I could have replied, me too. I could have replied, I understand. I could have replied, do you want to talk tonight? But I didn't. I think that was the moment I realized it wasn't just about her being busy. People can be busy and still reach. People can be stressed and still care. The issue wasn't time. The issue was priority, presence, desire. And those things can't be negotiated. So I let it go? Not dramatically. Not with a grand decision. I just didn't push. And that was the end. Or maybe it had already ended. And that was just me finally catching up. Some nights, even now, I still feel the old instinct. The urge to share something with her. Something small. A thought that doesn't matter. A joke. A moment in a song. And for a second, my thumb hovers over her name like it used to. Then I remember. Not in a triumphant way. In a quiet, resigned way. There's nothing to return to. Sometimes I wonder if she noticed when it changed. If she remembers the nightly calls, the long messages, the way we used to fall asleep mid-conversation. Maybe she does. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe for her, it just blended into the rest of her life, the way things do when they fade slowly. I don't hate her. I don't think she's a bad person. I don't even think she meant to hurt me. I think her feelings shifted at a pace mine didn't. And instead of addressing it, we both just adjusted, silently, until silence became the relationship. If there's a painful part in all of this, it isn't the ending. It's the lack of a clear ending. It's the way something can be so present, so constant, and then become a space you can't fill. We used to talk every night. And the nights weren't special. That's what makes it hard. They were normal. They were routine. They were the quiet backbone of the relationship. The part one assumed would always be there because it had been there for so long. I didn't know they were numbered. Now my phone is quiet most nights. Not in a peaceful way. Not in a healed way. In a way that feels unfinished. Like a conversation that stopped mid-sentence and never resumed. I don't sit here waiting anymore. I've learned not to. That kind of waiting teaches you things you don't want to learn. But the habit still shows up sometimes. That small reach for connection at the end of a day. That instinctive glance at the screen. And every time it happens, I feel the same brief, familiar ache. Not sharp. Not dramatic. Just there. Like everything else that ended without a goodbye. And maybe that's what stays with me the most. Not that we stopped loving each other. Not that we drifted apart. But that we went from talking every night to nothing. Without either of us ever saying, clearly, that it was over. Just a slow disappearance. A quiet exit. A door that closed so softly it took me too long to hear it.